Welcome to the Big Game Hunting Podcast, where we help hunters like you prepare for the big game hunting adventures you've always dreamed of. Now, here's your host, John McAdams.
Hello, John McAdams here. Welcome to episode 272 of the Big Game Hunting Podcast. Longtime podcast listener Austin Brown joined me on the show today to talk about his recent roe deer and chamois hunt with Joseph von Benedikt in Spain. As you will learn here shortly, they had an incredible adventure hunting two iconic species of European game in some absolutely stunning country. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, though, and they had to deal with some unexpected challenges and adversity on the hunt, but they were ultimately successful, and they ended up having a great trip. One, because the hunt ended up being so great and ended well, but at the same time, they also got to see some interesting and somewhat unplanned sides of Spanish history and culture on this hunt, too. Now, before we get started with all of that, make sure you are on my mailing list by signing up at huntingguns101.com. If you enjoy the podcast, you will like these emails, and in the unlikely event that you do not like hearing from me, that's fine. You can always unsubscribe later on down the line if that's how things go. But like I said, if you enjoy the podcast, you're probably going to like these emails, and you are missing out if you are not on that list and not getting them. I get feedback all the time from people who get those emails telling me how much they enjoy hearing from me. I also send out an in-stock ammo email update every Friday to everyone on the list with some of the latest news on ammo I have found and where you can get it. So click the link in the show notes or go to huntingguns101.com. Okay, let's get started talking to Austin about that great hunt he and Joseph von Benedikt had in Spain. All right, well, Austin, it is great talking to you on the show today about this hunt in Spain that we're about to dive into. Like you and I were chatting before I hit record, you're one of these people I have interacted with for a long time on Instagram, just talking about the show and guns and ammo and this and that. And so it is a pleasure to finally get a chance to talk to you, if not in person, at least on the phone like this.
Well, absolutely. Likewise. Yeah, I've followed along with your show and, really enjoy it. And I, enjoy a lot of the technical stuff, which is how I found it in the first place. So absolutely. Yeah. Finally good to visit with you as well.
Well, so the question I always have to ask everyone is how they found the Big Game Hunting Podcast. And so can you dive into some more detail and elaborate how you found me with the technical stuff on the cartridge comparisons and whatnot? I'm guessing that's what you ran across, right?
Yeah, no, it was. So I was just searching one day, putting in search words and, and I just used the Apple podcast, app on there. And the search feature is not the best, but I honestly can't remember. I searched a specific cartridge, if I remember right, and it popped up as a cartridge comparison. So, yeah, okay. And so, I listened to one episode and I liked it. And I thought, well, I just kind of kept going and kept digging deeper and deeper and deeper. Sad to say I haven't listened to every one of them. Sorry, John. But I filtered, you had a lot of content on there by the time that I found them. And so I picked my way through and listened to several of those, then listened to some of the hunting adventures. And, one of my favorites was with Leighton on the Aoudad hunt, which I've since connected with him, and we've talked more about guns and hunting and stuff like that. And so it is like we were talking beforehand. It's kind of amazing how social media and the podcasting world has brought different people together. But
yeah, 100%. So I'm looking actually at our Instagram direct messages right now, and I see you messaged me on September 10th, 2021. Found me through Joseph von Benedikt and talking about a whitetail hunt you had with a 375 H&H. So
there you go.
Come a long way since then. But so this podcast is not going to be completely about Joseph von Benedikt, but he's also going to be another big character in this play that we're going to describe here, because you guys went hunting in Spain together. So can you tell us how the heck you guys got to go on this darn hunt in Spain together that you went on here a few months ago?
Yeah, absolutely. So we were at Dallas Safari Club convention back in January. We had met there. Joseph was traveling. He flew in and met us there. And it was just one of those things of where, if you've never been to the DSC convention, I'd encourage anybody to go. It is part gun show, part hunting expo, and part, auction banquet, right? There's a banquet every night where they're auctioning off some great hunts. And we were there on Thursday. We like to go in early, beat the crowds, beat the weekend crowds, so you can actually still walk around, visit with your outfitters or dealers of equipment and guns and whatever else. But we were at one of the banquets on a Thursday night. Adam Weatherby had some tickets to get in. He had a couple extra, and then we picked up another one from Tim Fallon at FTW Ranch. And so we ended up going to the banquet as well with the whole group that we were with. And we were sitting there just kind of chit-chatting after dinner, not really paying attention, catching up on, who's been doing what and family members and this and that. And all of a sudden they started doing the auction, and we were kind of, halfway paying attention and flipping through the auction catalog as they did. And I noticed that a stag hunt in Argentina went for, maybe a third or a quarter of the list price that was in the catalog. And it kind of perked up. And I remember, kind of shooting a look over to Joseph, and I was like, hey, is there anything in here that you want to do? And so we started looking through there and thumbing through it, and we found a roe deer hunt in Spain. And I remember the list price on it was like $16,500. And I thought, okay, well, let's just see what this one does, And we followed along, and it got down to that one. And man, nobody was bidding on it. And it was like $2,500. And I thought, all right, here's the time. So we got a little bit of a bidding competition and ended up getting it for about $4,500. Mm-hmm. And I didn't even have a bidder number. So nice gal comes over from the DSC group, and she says, hey, what's your bidder number? I said, well, I don't have one. I said, but I bet you'll take a credit card anyway, won't you? And she said, yes, I will. And I said, well, okay, let's get a bidder number and get this done. And so she came over, we filled out the paperwork, we got that done. I turned around to Joseph and I said, you just bought half of a roe deer hunt, buddy. You in? So it was a laughing deal at that point in time, and then it kind of hit us all of a sudden. We got a little giddy and excited that like, holy smokes, we're going. And it was kind of one of those just crazy turn events. We didn't know what we were doing. We didn't know anything about the logistics. Each one of those hunts it'll list several people that have been before, and I knew 2 or 3 of the people that had been, and I thought, okay, if they're good enough to put their name on it and recommend it, I said, it can't be bad. So, but, for the price that we gave for it at the time, I thought, you know what, if it is, it's still an adventure, so what? And so then from there, we got back home and started planning. But that was how it really came about. It was just a spur of the moment DSC banquet, and then a spur of the moment DSC auction, and here we are, back home trying to figure out how we're going to get to Spain and get our guns there.
So many years ago, I was exhibiting at an outdoor show up in Washington State, up in Tacoma, and I remember talking to another outfitter that was there. I can't remember what he offered hunts for, black bear or something like that. And he was complaining because that year, once again, this is like 2015, 2016 or something, but like that year at Dallas Safari Club, they had stopped serving alcohol on the show floor. And he said that, man, it made it a whole lot harder to book hunts when people weren't just loosened up with a drink or two. And I remember thinking that was hilarious at the time. And then I've been to a couple of these shows and banquets myself and whatnot. And I'm not saying that you guys were getting a little rowdy or anything, but I'm sure that some people do get a little tipsy at those and book all kinds of things. And the next morning, like, oh my God, what the heck is going on here? What did I sign up for?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, yeah. I mean, I may have had one post dinner cocktail, and Joseph was on probably his first or second club soda, and so it wasn't that at all. It was just a simple, the adventure of it all, and thinking, well, why not? Yeah,
and since then, DSC has since changed their policy on the showroom floor and whatnot. But so you guys, you're just sitting there at the table and you just saw this hunt and you're like, oh, that sounds pretty cool. I'd like to do that. And neither one of you had any long burning desire. Oh, I'd really like to hunt roe deer in Spain or anything like that then.
Well, for me, roe deer was one of those classic species that I've always just kind of had, in the back of my mind. It was always on my radar and it has been for a long time because, to me, I think about them like they're that classic European species. And we've, my wife and I, we've traveled quite a bit. And we've, been to places where they might have them on the wall, and I love those little, like the little classic skull cap mounts that they do on a plaque. And you think of a Scottish manor or an English manor or something, in the hills, and they'll have these all over, right? And it'll say what they weigh or what their points were. the date, the hunter's name, and then it'll have, the carved wood with all the, the leaves and the hunting paraphernalia that go along with it. I think those are just so classy and iconic of European hunting. And so from that, I thought, well, if I ever hunt Europe, then I really want to go hunt roe deer.
And so roe deer are a more unique species that a lot of people probably aren't familiar with, right? I'm sure they're familiar with red stag, but can you explain in a little bit more detail what a roe deer is to someone that's never seen one before?
It's going to be a really very much of an overgeneralization, but a roe deer is probably kind of like our whitetail, right? It's their common deer that they have in Europe. I mean, you're going to see them almost everywhere. We were back in Germany here a few weeks ago, and we saw roe deer there as well. But it's going to be pretty widespread, right? And they're a very, very small deer. They're tiny. I'm going to say maybe the size of a yearling whitetail is kind of what I would equate them to. But they have really small antlers that come straight up, and they make there's a kicker that goes back and usually a couple brow tines. But one of the things that they really look for is kind of all the knobs and knurls and what we would think on the base of a whitetail, but much more aggressive. Lots of little stickers and points and this and that. So very, very small deer, but really just a really, really neat little animal that's so iconic of Europe.
And so they live all over the place in Europe, right? You said, they live in Scotland, and I'm sure they live all in Central and Eastern Europe as well. You signed up for this hunt in Spain, and you knew you'd always wanted to hunt them, but had never necessarily planned to hunt in Spain before. So what happened after you signed up for this hunt? How did your preparations go?
Yeah, so in the hunt package, it tells you, okay, you've got to do this in either 2023 or 2024. That's you got to fit it in that window. And you talk about the not serving alcohol on the floor at DSC. Well, that didn't really slow us down at all, because we planned, I think, 2 more hunts while we were on the floor at DSC. So one going to Mozambique in 2024 for buffalo, and another one with Crusader Safaris in 2025. So my 2024, which my wife was pretty upset, and she says you need to carry a calendar around with you and make sure you understand when and where, because what happened was I kept saying yes to all these hunts, and so now in 2024 I have 3 of them just almost back to back to back.
Oh goodness!
Going from Alaska to Africa within a few days of each other. So
jeez.
It got a little hectic and a little hairy on that deal, but anyway, so we don't regret it. But for us hunting in Spain, it was where the hunt was, right? And I didn't have any idea of what it was going to be like. So we get back and we're trying to figure out, Joseph as a full-time gun writer, I mean, and with the podcast and his wonderful family, I mean, he's a busy guy too. And so we're trying to figure out how both of our schedules can jive. And we went back and forth several times on it. And we finally decided on going in April of this year. So now let's back up, because it was the first week in January when we booked this thing, and we ended up going on the hunt, I believe, the second week in January, if I remember right. April. So we didn't have a lot of time to plan on this. Most of the time when you would do these things, I mean, you'd have a year or 6 months or whatever to get everything laid out. And so there's a little bit of logistical gymnastics that we had to do with coordinating with the outfitters in Spain, in which it was with Great European Hunts. And so we were dealing with Felipe. Felipe is Ignacio's number 2 over there. And so dealing with Felipe, trying to get everything lined out. For him, he's trying to fit us in a window that fits with our schedule, and our schedules are trying to, get together. And so that part was honestly probably the most difficult. So once we finally got it lined out, we didn't have a whole lot of time to get all of our paperwork done. And the paperwork involved in that is, so we have to write to the consulate, Ignacio and Felipe. So they sent us an invitation letter, which, a lot of people will be familiar with that for hunting overseas, that some places you have to have an invitation from your outfitter that says, yes, they're coming over to hunt. And it more or less, I mean, and again, probably another overgeneralization, but it serves kind of like a visa, right, for a hunter, to where it says, they're coming over here, here's their purpose, we know why they're here and why they're bringing firearms, for another thing. But so we had to send in, notarized and certified copies of our passports, our driver's license, our hunter's education card, which was a new one, hunting licenses, and in Oklahoma's is very general. I mean, it has your name on it and the number and a date, and that's it. Like there's nothing very formal looking about an Oklahoma lifetime license. So we get all this stuff gathered up and sent in. We send it to the consulate, and mine was in Houston, his was in Los Angeles, I believe. We don't know if we're going to get them back in time, because they're supposed to send you your actual hunting license and paperwork that you take physically with you, when you get to Spain to receive your firearms for one and to go through customs. And I think we ended up getting them. Now, I paid a little extra money and overnighted all of mine. So to back up a little bit, Joseph had just returned from Argentina on a stag hunt. And he said, "Hey, buddy, if you don't mind, can you just take the guns and I'll just meet you there if that's okay? I don't want to deal with the paperwork." I'm like, "Yep, not a problem." And so, had to send in the 4473s and all that stuff with it as well. But I think I got mine back because I, paid to overnight it both ways, just knowing that we were going to be, really close on time. And and if you look at the grand scheme of things, it's a little bit expensive. But if you're talking about maybe a once in a lifetime adventure, then what's a few extra dollars to make sure it goes a little bit more smoothly, right?
Right.
And so we ended up getting mine back. I think I got him back like a week and a half before we left, and he got his back like the day before we left. He had an email confirmation of, "Hey, here's a email copy of all your paperwork from the consulate," but then his arrived in the mail a day or two before we left. And so once we had all that, that was when we could kind of breathe and relax and say, okay, we're ready to go. So.
Man, yeah, it is interesting how that works oftentimes. I have never hunted Europe personally myself. However, I deal with a lot of my clients that go through Europe sometimes, going through from the United States through Europe, bringing guns, and so they have to deal with some of this stuff. It's different if you're transiting Charles de Gaulle International Airport versus on the way somewhere else rather than going there to hunt. But I found that a lot of those places have similar attitudes about it, where that you submitted your paperwork, we're going to get to it when we get to it, and you're going to have it in time, don't worry. But that and oftentimes it does, but like you said, many times they're approving it just a couple days before your hunt, before you're supposed to leave, and so guys really stress about it, like, "Oh man, is it going to get approved? What do I need to do if it doesn't get approved?" And usually it all works out, but I hear that sort of story a lot.
Oh, for sure. And and we've always taken the attitude on this stuff of anything that I can do above and beyond or a little extra to help grease the skids or whatever to make this, go more smoothly is absolutely worth it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right. So how did you guys travel from the United States to where you hunted in Spain?
Well, I mean, it just, simple flights over the pond. I mean, that really wasn't too hard.
Well, yeah, what was the airline and the route you took?
Oh, geez. Man, I'd have to go back and look at email confirmations. I want to say I took American this time, if I remember right. Mm-hmm. I believe Joseph was on Delta. But, most of the European countries, there's a lot of options. It's not like South Africa where you really have, kind of two ways to get there, right? I mean, you can either go through Newark or you can go through, Delta, through Atlanta to get there on the big flights, right? And so, I've noticed that, when you go to Europe, and like we're going to Madrid, mm-hmm. right? And so there's a lot of places and a lot of ways to get there. And you mentioned Charles de Gaulle a while ago. Man, if I can, I will avoid Paris like a plague. I do not like that airport, and they do not like firearms. And so it's just one of those things. Maybe not that they don't like them, they just don't understand them. Mm-hmm. And we've I don't even like going through there without them. So anyway, but I think my flight was direct. So from Tulsa to Houston and Houston straight over, I believe. And I think Joseph, he flies out of Salt Lake. And I want to say that he may have gone Salt Lake direct, actually.
Okay.
Think of it.
All right. So straight into Madrid. And then how much travel did you guys have to do after you actually got to Madrid to get to where you were hunting?
Sure. So when we got there, Joseph he got hung up. You know what? Now that I say that, nope, I think he went through Paris. Come to think of it, because he either had a delay or a hiccup on the front end to where he did have to make a connection in Europe, and I believe it was in Paris. So he came in after us. So Felipe, he picked me up, picked the guns up. We did the paperwork, which is, crazy simple. You go get your normal bag, and which we were traveling pretty light, not really knowing what to expect. Pick up the bags from the airport. Go over to the police office, pick up the guns, which my bag had the ammo in it, so it was all in the police office. A little bit of paperwork, a couple of guys talking in Spanish to each other, and most of it I couldn't pick up. And really, after that, they were out of there. Watch your guns get flopped around on the table a couple times, and kind of cringe, but which is normal. So it was really pretty simple. And then I think Joseph ended up coming in. 5 or 6 hours later. So we went, picked up the airport, got something to eat, checked into a hotel. I was kicked back taking a nap when Joseph got there, and Felipe picked him up as well and delivered him. And so from there, the next morning, our guide, Juan P., was there, and it's Juan Pablo. So, Juan P., which if you listen to the other podcasts and Joseph, we run that together terribly awful, and it just sounds like Wumpy. But he picked us up the next morning, and from there we drove up into the Pyrenees. So we drove straight. Well, I say straight north. It's more northeast out of Madrid up into the mountains, and till we more or less got to the end of a road. And so I can carry on there, John, but slow me down or stop me if you want me to go in a different direction there.
Yeah, sure thing. So how long let's talk a little bit more about exactly where in Spain you were going, what the terrain was like, that sort of thing.
Sure. So let's go back on this. Is when we were talking about, hunting roe deer, we decided that, at least I did, and Joseph had considered it too, but just at the time wasn't logistically possible. So I ended up adding a chamois, to my deal. So that was where we were headed. We were headed up into the Pyrenees to hunt chamois first, and then once we did that, we were going to come back and hunt close to Madrid. We were a couple hours west of Madrid for the second part, which is where we were both going to hunt the roe deer. And so where we drove, north through Spain, gosh, it's gorgeous. And the history there is something that I wasn't really familiar with, but I'm a huge history buff, and I love, learning about a culture, learning about a place when I'm there. And so there was so much time spent on Google as we were driving, and Wumpy was so gracious. And, we asked him a million questions, and he was so nice to answer, this is what happened here and there. And we get on, Google, and we'd fill in kind of the blanks and figure out, more about those specific areas. But yeah, we traveled north for the chamois first. We stopped off at this little, when you travel through Europe, you find these little cafes. There's so many different little places to eat. Everywhere you go, there's a spot that has food and has beverage, or, maybe it's even a fuel station as well. But we stopped off and got some local cheese and meat and bread, and jumped back on the road. And we were slicing up, meat and cheese and bread with one of our northern strikes that we took, because we always have to represent 11 on those things, and Joseph. But we drove north, and I want to say it was about a 7-hour drive up to where we were stopping. And the little town that we were in, I forgive me on the name of it, and I can go back and look it up here, but we stopped and we basically stayed at what we would consider a bed and breakfast. All these little inns here, or some of them are called hostels, but we found out later they're really a hotel, and they're just under the hostel name because the taxes are more favorable, is our understanding on that. But every one of these little hotels would have, several rooms. I think this one had maybe 15, 20 rooms in it. But the downstairs was a coffee shop in the morning, which turned into the bar in the evening. And then there was a dining room next door. And so you could, get your meals, have your coffee, have, your breakfast, your after dinner cocktails, whatever. But it was all right there in one deal. And it was run by, a very mom and pop deal. And their younger daughter was more or less our main contact, and I think probably because she spoke English a little bit better than Mom and Dad did. Where we were at, they spoke a different dialect of Spanish, and it was Catalanian, and they kind of identify separately from the rest of Spain, have their own flag and all kinds of stuff. Kind of like you guys down there in Texas, John. You know, you'd rather be not part of the union anymore, right? But which I don't blame you. Take Oklahoma with you. We're good with that. So they were really, really welcoming. I mean, everything, the hospitality was just phenomenal. The food was really good. I mean, they were just so gracious. And, you know, we were there. So this is more of a winter activity area for tourists, you know, whether it was skiing or mountain climbing or whatever it was. And so we were there somewhat in the off season, and they had several workers there that worked on the hydroelectric dams that were in the area. But for us, I mean, we were just kind of a sideline, you know, summertime tourist for them. And I really felt like they rolled out the red carpet for us because, you know, I think they were honestly, truly, you know, glad to have us there. But so we stayed there, and then from there we hunted. And so think about it, we're in the mountains at this point in time, and I'm talking about like snow capped still in April, which is not a lot. You know, that's not too surprising, but they're tall. We ended up hunting above tree line, which in the tree line there was only about 7,500 feet. You know, so it's a little different from us in the Rockies, but it was, I mean, just rocky, jagged, I mean, mountainous areas with little rolling valleys in between that, you know, with water running through them, and there'd be roe deer and fallow and things like that, and some wild boars. We never did see the boars, but a lot of just little farm areas in between, you know, the big jagged edges of the Rocky Mountains. I mean, it was, and not the, you know, Rocky Mountains, but the Rocky is a description.
Rocky is an adjective, not a noun here.
There you go. There you go. But anyway, so it was just really, really gorgeous. But the valley that we were in, I believe, and this is going to be a wrong number, but I believe there were 30 small lakes that were all the way up through the top of this valley, and we hunted near one of the ones at the bottom. But the lakes were built for hydroelectric power, and they supplied a huge area. I mean, just an enormous area. And so, you know, in that other podcast I was kind of describing, it reminded me somewhat of like watching a James Bond movie, to where you're in this beautiful, just picturesque mountainous landscape, but then you have these giant power lines running right down the middle of the valley, you know, and so you would think that would take away from it, but it didn't. You know, it somehow did fit that area, and there's a giant, you know, concrete dam on one side of it, and there's nobody around. It's not like it's bustling with people or anything. There is nobody around. There's a lodge up at the top of these things, and there was a gondola that went up to it. We never saw it. It was far away from us, but just the most picturesque mountain scenery you could think of, save for the power line that ran down the middle of the valley.
Interesting. And so you were up towards the Pyrenees Mountains, then up towards the boundary, or excuse me, towards the border with France?
Correct.
Okay, man. Yeah, I remember being struck by the description of the place of a straight out of a James Bond movie. Man, it sounds beautiful.
Oh, it's incredible. Absolutely incredible.
And so you're getting up there. Chamois is the first thing on the list. So both of you were after roe deer. You were after chamois, and then they take you up into the mountains here, and this is the prime habitat, right? Good spot to get one. What happens next?
So the first night, you know, we went out and checked our rifles. I was shooting my 280 Ackley, and I built it, gosh, I think back in maybe 21. It was. I built that in 21. You know, it's one of those rifles that I'd always kind of wanted, a 280 Ackley. You know, probably somewhat of an influence by Joseph as well. But I built my first mountain rifle, and I did it with a carbon 6 1-in-7 twist barrel, 22-inch barrel on it, AG composite stock. I believe I did the trigger tech on that one, and then, you know, put a loophole 3.5 to 14 by 40 one of their VX3 scopes on that one with the CDS, which I love those CDS turrets. And so we went out, checked the zero on the rifle, and the banging it around in the police office in the airport. It was necessary to make a few adjustments on it, and then also for our altitude as well, because we didn't have any idea what the altitude we were going to be hunting at. And so where we zeroed the rifle was about 5,000 feet. Mm-hmm. And then we ended up hunting, on upwards of around 7 to 7,500 feet is where we ended up, on our final stock. But we checked the rifles that night before and glassed around a little bit until it got dark. And it's amazing, just like any animal that's in their environment, of how a chamois can just disappear into the rock or appear, right? I mean, you can be looking at a crevice and all of a sudden, there's one of them standing there, and then the next thing you know, there's 5 of them. I mean, it's just, really incredible to watch those animals, navigate in that just, pretty hostile environment, honestly. But what they would do is they would come out and they would pick around on some of the green grass. And so as the slopes were starting to green up, the chamois were following that fresh green, the more nutrient dense grass, as it greened up and started growing again after the snowpack left. And so we would kind of figure out where to look for them and find, some here and there. But then we also saw some roe deer that were down in the bottom of the valley to where, the dam drained through. But we stood at the end of this, I want to call it, it's kind of like a box canyon is really kind of what it was, where this dam was. And, you'd stand in one spot and you could look in 3 directions and see, chamois almost everywhere. And so that was just kind of a nice deal, to get in, get your binoculars out, check it out, see what it's going to be like, and really get excited for the next morning. And to be honest with you, John, I was so jacked up, I didn't sleep a wink. I mean, probably some jet lag in there too, but I was up at 2:00 that morning and I just couldn't go back to sleep. So I ended up laying there in bed and reading until we got up at 5:00, and then I went down to the coffee shop and sat there in the dark because I couldn't find the light switch, and waited on everybody else to get there. But yeah, and so from there, we took off and we picked up our local gamekeeper. He met us at the lodge, and oh my gosh, this guy was awesome. I mean, I think he was 27 years old, 26 years old, something like that. And just made out of part billy goat, because he could climb the mountains while chain smoking hand-rolled cigarettes, and we're huffing and puffing. And Joseph stays in pretty good shape, in Idaho. I mean, he lives a lot higher than I do. I mean, I'm at 700 feet here in Oklahoma, and just the only thing that I have to struggle breathing through is the humidity. So, he's going up and down these mountains, but these guys, they run cattle and sheep, and they have them up and down the mountains and grazing them on this, on the government, land, throughout the summers. And so they're all the time up and down, up and down, up and down. And he was a specimen of physical health that also chain smoked hand-rolled cigarettes. It was really cool. But we picked him up and headed up into the mountains, and we started off glassing. It was pretty wet where we were at. There were some, storms that had rolled in. I say storms. I mean, just kind of think of a mountain pop-up shower. They'll roll through a little bit. You don't want to get caught up too high in them because you don't know how bad they're going to be. But it would rain for a little bit. We tucked back under the edge of a rock ledge there and waited and glassed, and it was just really neat. And so, and Joseph and I both, I mean, we probably could have taken one chamois from the bottom right there and never hiked up. But, we're there for an adventure. We want to see what's over that next hillside, or what's around the next break in the terrain, or, over the ridge or whatever. And so we decided to go on up. And the neat thing about this is just, there's all these little fingerprints of some industrial touch, right? Whether it's the power lines, or when we got up to the top, we followed as we side hilled around the edge of this mountain, we were on an old railway, and this railway was there from when they constructed these dams, way back when. And that honestly made side hilling really nice, because we were walking on a flat area. But so we went up there, and we were at about, I want to say 6,800, 7,000 feet right in there as we followed this thing around, and you walk through some tunnels that they'd cut through the sides of the mountains, and I mean, it's just an amazing thing. I mean, every time you look up, it just almost takes your breath away. And part of I think the beauty of that is that we had no idea what to expect. We had no expectations at all, and we were just there in an environment completely at the mercy of somebody else. And the only thing that we had was experience as hunters, and knowing how to look for game and pick game out of areas, even though they do look a little bit different. But yeah, it was really, really, really just a gorgeous experience. And then following these two guys, that are born and bred in this area up the mountain, and watching how gracefully they pick around on the rocks. I mean, similar to how the animals that live there, right?
Right.
So it was cool.
And so how did things go down when you actually were able to take the chamois?
So we'd seen several as we walked around, and there were some hiking trails there too. We did see a couple of the hikers that went, off another direction up towards the lodge that the gondola went to. So we turned around and headed more or less kind of down the valley from where we were at, where we initially started, but side hilled all the way around. And so, it was one of those deals that every time that you'd come around, a break in the terrain, well, you would look for animals, right? And these guys, I mean, they, of course they can spot them so fast. And so there was at one point we came around a grassy slope that was in the sun. And I believe, if I remember correctly, there were 40 or 50 some, chamois all grazing in this area, with one really good male that was up higher. He was probably, I'm just going to guess, he's probably 300 or 400 feet higher than where we were, but 800 yards away, right? Mm-hmm. And so we asked, I remember asking Wampy, hey, can we make a play on this one? He goes, yeah, we can, but it'll probably be, 4:00 in the afternoon before we get there. Well, I mean, this is maybe 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning at this point in time. So we decided to keep looking. So as we followed the hill around, we would just slowly pick our way through there and keep glassing. And eventually we had hunkered down in an area, and we'd watched several that were 600 or 700 yards kind of on down if we continued our path. And we were trying to figure out if there's, a mature male in there to take. And we decided to keep moving. That, I think we'd probably stop there for, 30 or 40 minutes, John, as we were looking around. We had seen some fallow deer there as well, and just really kind of we were glassing from just a really gorgeous vantage point. But as we snuck around the edge of this hill, there were some chamois that were bedded just above our heads, maybe 60 or 70 yards away, that we couldn't see because of the terrain. And so when our gamekeeper stood up and started walking around, we spooked one of them. Well, or maybe two, excuse me, he spooked two of them. Well, the two females went up and over the hill, and then he saw a flash of a male. And so we snuck back around, back the way we had come to our left, and got ready for a shot to set up, and just in case it happened to be a good one. And so the two females came out, and they took that male with them. And I don't think that the male was necessarily, in the same group as them, as much as it was they just spooked him as they spooked as well, and he was going in the same direction. Mm-hmm. And so we ended up getting the packs out, throwing them down on the ground. Joseph's on the binos, Wampy's on his binos as well, and of course we're doing the mental gymnastics of calculating the difference between meters and yards and this and that.
Geez, yeah.
At that point in time, and and then we're shooting. Man, it was a pretty steep uphill angle from where we were at. I want to say they were at least 250 feet above us at 250 yards, and so it was pretty steep shot up there. But anyway, so once they looked him over, they got the spotting scopes out, and they decided, yep, that's one that we want. And our gamekeeper has pictures of all of these, as he's up and down just through his daily life. I mean, he's taking pictures of all the good males, and so he has a pretty good mental, Rolodex of the animals that are there, which ones they want to take, which ones are mature enough, and you kind of see him checking those references against. Okay, yep, I do recognize this one, and anyway, so I'm on the scope. I'm ready, locked and loaded, good to go. And Wampy just says, "Yep, green light." And so the chamois was moving. He was moving uphill some and facing like pretty steep quartering away. And right when the shot broke, he ended up taking a step with his back leg, and it was the strangest thing because shot felt good, looked good, everything that we could see. And Joseph at this time put his binoculars down, pull his camera out or his phone out, and so he was trying to film on the shaky iPhone, and so he has a pretty good look at what happened. And so anyway, shot him. We could see that he was hit. And Wampy is just, as all good guys are, of good game, guides that have seen lots and lots of animals shot. He says, "Yep, reload." Very calmly. He says, "Hit him again." And he at this point in time, so he was facing steeply quartered uphill to the right when I shot him. Well, now he's ran, and I can see that his back right side is kind of wobbly. And I thought, wow, that's strange. Like that shot felt really good, looked really good. That wasn't anywhere near where I was holding that. And so he's going to the left now, and I rushed my second shot and just right over the top of his back, and took a deep breath, chambered another round, and just center punched him on the third one, and he went down. And so I said, hey, let's give him a minute. We'll let him go down. But we could see, as he rolled down the hill, we could tell from the trail of red that he left that he really wasn't going anywhere. Mm-hmm. But we gave him a moment anyway and stayed on him for a little bit. And then when we finally relaxed, Joseph went back and reviewed the footage. And what had happened was, we were watching it, and you can see his side, ripple as it took the impact of that bullet. But what we missed is when he took that step forward, he was going so steeply uphill that he lifted his back right leg. So it ended up catching him more or less in his right knee and then into the bottom of his brisket. And so it eventually probably would have got him, but it wasn't as quick as we would want it to go. And so the next shot was, that third shot was fine and put him down. But yeah, it was one of those things of where, us as hunters, and we shot a lot of stuff, think, okay, yeah, I feel pretty good about that one. And honestly, candidly probably admired my shot just a little bit, instead of getting back in the scope and reloading like I should have, like I've practiced a million times. But when we put the third one on him, that was that. And what was really funny is then we decided to, pack up all of our gear and hike up to go get him. And there's this gorgeous little outcropping of rocks that ran out. And we make our way up there. Of course, we really haven't had to do much tough hiking in the last couple hours because it's all been on the side hill. So now we're going up and we're stepping over the tussocks of grass, which they almost remind you of tundra, right? And just the little mounds of grass, but also on a pretty steep incline, right? And so it was challenging. And our chain smoking gamekeeper, he just bounces right up there. And, it probably took us a good 15 or 20 minutes to cover 250 yards. It was just, it took a minute. And so we get up there and we're talking about, oh yeah, that's cool. We took a couple pictures there in the moment. And then we decided to move the chamois up to the vantage point, and Joseph, putting his photography, to work, and his artist's eye, he says, hey, let's take him over there on this outcropping of rocks. I think I can get some good stuff from there. As we're talking about it, he's like, all right, you grab a horn and I'll grab a leg and this and that. And our game guy just picks him up one-handed and he bounces up the rocks. It just takes him up there like, listen, we're not talking about this. There's nothing to debate. I've got it. So, again, making us feel a little bit silly.
So looking at your Instagram profile, the terrain that you guys were hunting in was very impressive.
It was. It was much more rugged than we had envisioned for sure.
And so you said that shot was about 250 yards, but also I
believe so, yeah.
Also at a very steep upward angle too. Had you ever taken a shot on an animal at a really crazy angle like that before?
I've taken a few, but I hunt here in Oklahoma. There are no angles where I'm at. It's flat. Mm-hmm. So it's I've taken a few in Africa like that. And Joseph was, in the background. He's, done a lot of that. And so he's kind of talking to me, hey, hold just a little bit here, hold for, X amount of yards instead of, whatever. But anyway, so all in all, it was different, right? And so to answer your question, no, I have not shot a lot of steep angles like that.
Yeah, I mean, neither am I. I live down in East Texas, and everything down here is, I wouldn't say flat as a pancake, but pretty darn flat. I took a shot on a tar in New Zealand that was, it felt like it was like a 45-degree angle down. I was above them, and it wasn't very far, and it was fine and everything, but it was, I mean, it's challenging doing that, especially those first few times that you do it.
Yeah, it's just something that we, mentally don't think about, right? As guys that have grown up not having to do that, or, in those environments. I think where, for like Joseph, I mean, it's fairly intuitive for him, right? Growing up hunting in the West.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And so remind us again what bullet you used from your 280 on this hunt.
Yeah. So I'm a hand loader, and I love, building loads and coming up with, and tuning it to your rifle and everything. But that rifle, when I got it all put together, I came up with some Nosler trophy grade, 140 grain Accubons, and I love an Accubon. I really, really do. Mm-hmm. So when we went on the, that first hunt in Kodiak with that thing, it's just what I had at the time. I didn't have time to work up hand loads, and so I grabbed them. They luckily shot great, and I have used nothing but ever since. I have this custom rifle that I built, but I've never once worked up a hand load for it, just because those Nosler factory rounds shoot so well.
Well, Nosler legitimized that cartridge, so it makes sense that they make good ammo for it too. That'd be a terrible shame if they didn't.
Absolutely, they do. But most of the time, I'll shoot the 160s. But I had 140s at the time. With everything being, the shortages that we're dealing with. I had enough 140s to get me by, and I thought, well, for what we're doing, it'll be perfectly fine.
Yep, and it sounds like when you placed it correctly, that it did the job on that Chamois. I'm not giving you a hard time about that either. Sometimes.
Oh, I need it. I deserve it. It's fine.
Well, so now we're in Spain. We got your chamois on the ground. Tell us about how the transition went going out to hunt roe deer now.
Yeah, sure. From there, we really loaded our chamois up, right? I mean, they collected the trophy and whatnot. And on that one, because it was early summer, I mean, they were shedding so bad. So I didn't get a cape to bring back, which is fine. But we just did the skull of them and took the trophy back with us. And then from there, we loaded up the next day, and we thought that we were going to leave that night and head down to where we were going. I mean, it wasn't that late in the afternoon by the time we got back. I mean, I want to say it was maybe 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon by the time we got back to the lodge. And the lodge itself was maybe only 10 or 15 miles just down the valley from where we parked and started hiking up. Mm-hmm. And but anyway, so from there, Wampy said, "Hey, let's we're going to try to get out of here," and he couldn't get the logistics worked out, and so we ended up spending an extra night, which was really probably, I mean, aside from taking the animals, was probably one of the coolest things that happened to us, because what happened is we went to this next little village, and these little villages are built out of they're built out of rocks. I mean, there was maybe 15 families that lived in this small area. Most of them, live off the land from the area with cattle or chickens and, whatever else that they have. Some of them work for the government. Some of them, work in, the tourism industry and things like that, but they've lived there for generations. And we ended up, going and touring around this little town. We asked Wampy, said, "Hey, can we stop and look around?" He said, "Sure. Yeah." And we get to looking around this little town, and we went to a chapel that they had, and it's kind of one of the things that you pick out first, either a cathedral or a chapel, because there's so much of a culture's history, ingrained in those type of things that they focus so heavily on. They're so important to them, right? Mm-hmm. And we find this little one-room chapel, and they're doing a restoration on it. And we're going around, we're taking pictures of it, and we asked, hey, can we come inside? Well, it's about the time that they were getting ready to close, for the day and take off. And they said, "Yeah, sure, come on in." Well, we get to looking around, and right as you go in the door of this, just gigantic solid wood door with the old, the stereotypical skeleton key locks, just really, old stuff. Well, there's a glass piece in the floor, and neither one of us noticed it. And I had went through it, taken my pictures, I'd walked back out, no big deal, but it's covered in dust, and so it was really kind of, hidden. Well, Joseph hollers at me and said, "Hey, come back, come check this out." And so in the floor of this church during the restorations, they had found the skeleton of what turns out to be a knight from the Crusades. And just slight background on that is, so as the Crusades were happening, right? We're there's knights and whatnot coming from Europe, right? So kind of France, Germany, that Eastern Europe, going down into what we think of as the Middle East. But the path that they took in some situations was through the Pyrenees. And so this knight was the story goes, it was on his way home, going back up, through whatever the pass was to get through the Pyrenees back to where he was going, and for some reason didn't make it, whether he was wounded, whether he got sick, whatever. But they knew they could find shelter in these little towns as they were traveling. But anyway, ends up dying there. Now, the weirdest part of this is that the way he was oriented, he was back by the front door of the church, so he's kind of in a corner. Most people of importance they would bury in the main area, but he was also face down, which we thought was really fascinating. And it's like, and so we talked to a couple of the ladies. They're like, "Yeah, we don't know if he was maybe not so nice, or what happened of why they would have buried him by the door and face down of all things." Now, there's lots of things that you can come up with to try to figure out what the real story was, but it was just a really fascinating thing. And then from there, we walked around and we looked at at some of the cemeteries, and we looked at some of the houses, and we, they still have areas of where the livestock are kept on the main floor of the house, and the families live in the second and third stories. And part of the reason for that is because, the livestock generates heat. And so that was part of the way that they kept the house warm throughout the colder months of the year, was by having the livestock in there with them. But again, everything built out of stone and timber. And we stopped and we talked to a couple ladies that were walking around, and they were feeding chickens, and we visited with them a little bit. And you could see most of the houses were named. They had a name above the door, next to the door of the family that lived there. It'd be like, Casa de John, right? Whatever the name of the house was of the family that was there. And so it was just really fascinating to talk to those ladies and see, the culture of how people live, and not just what we see as a tourist in a foreign land on a fly-by trip, right? But just taking that time to slow down and really just soak in that flavor, that culture was probably one of the coolest things that we got to experience in that part of that, and where we were hunting the chamois in that area. That was really neat.
Yeah, that is really cool. A lot of things that you didn't necessarily initially bargain for when you booked this hunt that turned out to be nice little bonuses, huh?
Oh, for sure. And then from there, we had about a 9-hour drive from where we were hunting the chamois down to where we were going to hunt the roe deer. And a little town that we were headed to was called Turgano, and it was, like I said, a couple hours west of Madrid. And so now we're leaving the mountains, and as we get out of the mountains, and we're on interstates. We're, just like you would think of, driving I-35 or I-40 or whatever, right, around here. It's a big interstate system. There's little towns that are here and there. But as we're driving through this area, you can slowly see the terrain change from the mountainous areas to, we drove through some passes that, we're following just, big, raging rivers that are going down through these, mountainous valleys, back up and out. And then we get into more of the farm country, and the farm country for them, there were just like you would think of here, there were fruits, there were cereal grain crops. There was, what am I trying to think of? Like canola, and things like that. Some more industrial type, crops and stuff like that.
But it was just really, really neat, and a lot of it was irrigated. And that as we drove through, you could see the irrigation channels and the nets that they'd placed over, the different fruit to keep the birds off of them and whatnot. But yeah, it was just, it is different yet really familiar. And I'm an agriculture guy. I mean, we have a farm up here. We raise cattle. We don't grow anything as far as tillage wise, but I'm an old animal science guy, and so that the agriculture piece of that is so fascinating to me. But as we drive through that stuff, the craziest thing that I think is how much influence there were, or there still is, I guess I should say, from when Spain and the Iberian Peninsula was part of the Muslim Empire. Mm-hmm. And so every hillside that you see has a castle or a house or a guard tower or a church surrounded by a wall with a small village around it. And these were all how they all started. From what Wampy's explanation was, that they were all individual tribes. And so the tribe would live here, and if they saw some of the Muslims coming to raid them or coming, in their direction, well, they were putting up the signal fires, right? Mm-hmm. And so it was the signal fire warning system that they were using, all these lookout towers and things like that, not only to see them coming, but then also for protection when they did come. And Wampy was gracious enough to stop. We'd see a really neat one, and he'd pull over, and we'd look around, and we'd get out and translate what we could, into English for us. And it was so fascinating just to see all of that history, and ended up, again on the Google deal, and learning so much about, some of the monarchs and how they ended up, the Christians ended up taking back the Iberian Peninsula from the Muslims and driving them out. I mean, it was a huge history lesson as we were going through this just gorgeous country. But you could see that influence on some of those churches to where, maybe the bottom half of the main, body of the church had more of a Middle Eastern flavor to it in architecture. But then the top, they would have another column built on top of it, or they'd added onto the top of it for the Christian influence that they'd added to later to make this our own. And, we've done this throughout history, whether we built there's cathedrals that are built on top of old churches that are built on top of old, Roman structures and things like that. We keep using these historic and religious markers over and over and over, but the new generation adds their own, personal beliefs and personal flavor to everything. And so as we drove down, we got a lot of that. But when we pulled into Turgano, we saw probably the best castle that we had seen. I mean, this is straight out of a fairy tale of where there's a castle in the middle, there's a church in the middle of that, and then outside of it, there is a big wall, and you can see where the moat used to be. So there was a huge, deep dugout ditch of where the moat was, or, even if it wasn't filled for water, it was at least something to help deter somebody from coming in that was uninvited. But then outside of that, there was, again, another large structure, and some of the pillars were still there. Most of the wall was gone on the outside of this one, but they had these great big giant, you could see where there was an earthen and stone wall, but there was giant towers in between them, and the towers each had a passageway through them that looked like it was just tall enough for a person on a horse to ride through. Mm-hmm. So it looked like they could, transverse all the way around the inside of these things, while being protected and not being outside of the walls. And so we get to our little hotel, we go upstairs, check in our room, and we've seen this castle driving in. We open the double windows, or the double, well, I almost say doors. They were heavy wooden, shutters over the windows. There's no glass. And so we open these doors and look out, and we have the most picturesque view of this castle just right outside of our room. And of course, in most of Europe, that's your air conditioning, right? The window is your way to control the climate in your area, in your deal. So, but no, we were just so impressed and just, absolutely in awe of the little town of Turgano and our accommodations and that, enormously gorgeous castle that was there right outside our window.
Yeah, I'm looking on Google Maps right now at that castle. That thing is super darn cool. Well, so you drove all this way to get get to where you can hunt some roe deer, and it sounds like this is a very different part of the country. So tell us how this aspect of the hunt went.
So this part where we were at now was known historically for wool, so merino wool, and also for their timber industry. There was a lot of row crops there, but there was also this vast tract of pine forest. And forgive me, I never did figure out the exact kind of pine tree that these were. But so they had done two things. They collected the sap from them for use in all kinds of stuff, but they had also harvested the wood as well. And what we understood was that a lot of the ships that came to the New World, for exploration or monetary gain or gold or whatever, were built with wood and sealed with pitch from this area, which we thought was, really fascinating. We come over here to see this, but this is where the stuff that came over to see us came from. It was just really cool. And so what we were doing is it was very sandy, and it would remind you almost of like the Carolinas or Georgia, and how it's sand and pine trees, right? With low grass inside of them, and there's really not much brush. It's more of a grassy area, and it had been very dry. And so we ended up, that first evening of driving around. We're in a Toyota 4Runner, and so we've now. Felipe had rejoined us. He did not go with us on the chamois hunt, but we picked him up, and he rejoined us there at Turgano. And we jump in, and so now we're hunting these forests. Well, there's this huge tract of land that sits outside of town with these. We're going to call them a road, but it was just a sand path that crisscrossed all over. Now, this is, for most of Europe, you can really go anywhere you want to go. Now, you have to have a license or permission or a permit to hunt. But if you want to walk through, the forest or bike or horse ride or whatever else, the public is welcome to do that in a lot of places. Now, I'm not going to say that's everywhere, but, this was one of those places where there were also public, people out there just enjoying nature as well. And so we ended up driving through the forest to, kind of get an idea of, what's out here. And we took a little drive that evening. And honestly, John, it probably kind of reminds you of Africa. Most of the time when I've been there, it's that first night you go out and you drive around and you just, hey, let's just go see what the landscape looks like, and check it out. And it was a lot like that. And so that first night, as we were driving around, I told Joseph, I was like, hey, we're not even flipping a coin for this. I got to hunt the chamois. I want you to go on the roe deer. Go get them, buddy. And so he took my 280 Ackley. He was shooting that. Well, I took another rifle with me as well, and I'd picked up a little Ruger African in 6.5 by 55.
That's really cool.
And I know you're familiar with them, but those little Africans are really cool because they've got the iron sights on them. They've got the sling swivel out on the barrel. They're just a little bit classier special run of a Model 77, and they're chambered in different stuff. And some of them are Lipsy's run, some of them are just a Ruger run. But I have two of those. I have one in 9.3 by 62, and I have that one at 6.5 by 55. But I had a chance to work up some hand loads with that. And I need to flip back here a bit and see exactly what those ended up running at. We're just looking at that the other day. Let's see. So I'm shooting a little 6.5 by 55, but Joseph's shooting a 280. Anyway, we drive around for quite a while. And, for us, we were kind of hoping more to get out and stock. And we were asking, Felipe and Wampy about that. And he said that because it had been so dry, the deer were spread out, fair, instead of being concentrated like they had hoped they were, the deer were spread out quite a bit. And so the only way to effectively cover the territory was by driving around and seeing lots of it, right? And so, which was fine. We're there. That's why they're there, right? They're there to help us, fulfill our, adventure and take an animal or whatever. And whether that's not quite what we had pictured in mind, there's nothing wrong with that. It is what it is in that situation. And so we drove around for quite a while, and we saw a couple stags, and then we saw a few roe deer. But eventually we stopped, and I believe it was Felipe that spotted it first. But anyway, so there was a roe deer stag that was standing out maybe 100 yards from the car. and they were doing any time you do anything with those professional hunters, I mean, they're going to get an eye on it. They're going to say, okay, yes, that's mature. Yes, that's one we want to take. And so it told Joseph, hey, go ahead and hop out. And so he's on the pasture side. He's, sitting on his butt, braced up, and getting ready for a shot. And he hears Wampy say, yes, that's a good one. But about that time, Felipe says, hold on. Well, if you know Joseph, I mean, he is a true hunter at heart. And so, I mean, he got that green light. And I mean, as soon as the second he heard green light, I mean, the shot broke. And he ended up taking his almost the same thing that I did, and he hit him just a little bit low I believe he hit him through both front legs. And so, he did the whole wheelbarrow deal where he just, the back feet are turning and the front feet are down. And anyway, ended up, following him up and finishing with a knife. And all the European guys carry a working blade of some kind, because they don't really believe in, if an animal is down, they don't really believe in shooting it again. They want to go ahead and, use a knife to finish it quickly to bleed him out. I mean, it's just, part of it's tradition, part of it's, maybe it's more humane, whatever it is. Right. But, Wampy catches up to the deer and he, and gets a hold of him, and he was so gracious. And then just the marker of a great guide and a great game person and a great hunter and just a very genuine person is he turns around and, handle first, offers the knife to Joseph so Joseph can finish his animal. And that meant the world to him. And I just thought, that was a special deal right there. And I just, I thought that was a very, very nice touch to a pretty quick hunt that, may have not been going quite the way we thought it was going to go as far as, just driving around instead of getting out and stalking. But anyway, so we got his that first night and we loaded it up there. We took the pictures and, I feel bad for him because, Joseph is so good at taking pictures, and then he hands me the camera and I'm not. And so the poor guy has to deal with what I give him. And, but anyway, so we get the pictures taken, and it's really fun. And I've mentioned this before, and it always is kind of a joke, and it's kind of not. But when you go and you hunt with somebody that makes their living by writing about it and taking pictures of stuff, I mean, it is a 45-minute photo session, right? Of getting the light right and getting the backgrounds right and the angles. And I've learned so much, hunting with him but it cracks me up every time. We're hanging out on an outcrop of rock, or dug down in a sandy hole and full of briars and stickers and stuff, and trying to get the perfect shot. But anyway, so we get loaded up, and we go back to our hotel. We have a wonderful meal in the same as the other one. There was the little cafe area, then there was the restaurant kind of dining room area. But it was, we went back and we celebrated with, Spanish cheese and bread. And, I believe we had roasted lamb that night. They had started it that morning. No, I apologize. That's the next night. But anyway, so we went back and, and celebrated a wonderful meal. I mean, the cheese and the bread and the Spanish, the flavors were one of those things that we had every day. So, but then, so the next day, we get up, it's my turn, and we get out. It's fairly early, not necessarily like crack of dawn or anything like that, kind of like we would do here. But we get out, we're driving around, and it's similar deal of we're driving to find the animals, and we'd spotted a few here and there, but then we saw a couple that we lost them through the brush, and then they ran over into this big depression, and what it kind of looked like, John, was probably like where an old river channel had cut the side of the hill away, but has since moved out. And so there was kind of a brushy area on the other side, but as we set up on the top, I mean, it was probably a good 150 foot drop down to a flatter area that was that old riverbed, and then the current river channel was on the other side of it. But oh my gosh, the deer were running everywhere in there, and there was 3 or 4 different females that were running, and there was one of the little roebucks was chasing him around, and and they weren't supposed to be rutting at this point in time. I mean, they were still I think 5 or 6 weeks away from that, but you could have fooled me that this buck wasn't running or rutting anyway. I mean, he was fighting every tree that he came in contact with. He was, running does around. And so, we're about 350 yards away up the hill, and I just can't get him to hold still long enough. And from where I was at, Joseph's a huge bipod proponent. I used to hunt with one all the time. I haven't in years because I could always flop a pack down or find a tree or something. And finally I had one of those situations where I needed a bipod and I didn't have one. And our friend Rob Gearing would absolutely be ashamed of me. And I'm sure he will if he hears this. So I'm going to tell him to avoid this podcast. But he, anyway, so I, didn't have a bipod, but couldn't get a shot, and the deer ends up running out and away. Well, in the meantime, we're sitting there. There was a group of wild boar that end up kind of boiling over the hill across on the other side of this little valley and down in the, off and towards the river. But it's kind of cool, if you think about how they always run in a line and kind of that classic European, running boar shot, right? Mm-hmm. But that was just kind of a little extra thing. It was really cool to see. And so we went back to the truck and we loaded up and we kept, driving around the forest roads. And eventually, and it was probably 15 or 20 minutes later, we came across a buck, and we're not sure if it's the same one or not, but it kind of went in that similar direction. And, of course, the brakes go on, everybody lurches forward in the cab of the 4Runner, and Wampy says, "Hey, get out and get ready for a shot." And so, I swung the door open and stepped out, and I'm I get braced up and get solid and get ready, and the buck is about 220 yards, if I remember correctly, away, facing the left. And the round, so I had time to work up a load in this 6.5 by 55. And what I ended up doing was loading 100 grain Barnes TTSXs, and those were and that's 6.5 by 55. Those are running 3,300 to 40 feet per second. So they were smoking out of that little 6.5 by 55. But man, you want to talk about just a flat shooting little laser. It was awesome. Very minimal recoil. And so, he's 250 yards away. So there's no dialing, there's no anything. And one is the same thing. Wampy says, "Yep, absolutely, green light." He shot the deer. He fell down right there, reloaded, learned from the last time, right, where I embarrassed myself and, admired my shot on the chamois. And so reloaded on that one, and watched him, and Wampy goes, "Yep, he's down." And so no sooner did I take my head out of my scope, Joseph says, "Hey, your deer's up." Well, by the time I get back in my scope, he's already back down again. And I'm like, "No, that can't be. That can't be." No, we saw him go down. We saw him kick in. He was down and done. And so Wampy and I ended up going up there. And the best thing was when Wampy first, got to the deer. Of course, he asked permission if he could touch it first. And the professionalism of this guy is just off the charts. I'm like, yeah, it's as much your trophy as it is my trophy, right? And of course you can. But he was so excited. I thought he was going to absolutely just wring my neck, hugging me. And he was, just beside himself. And you could just see the pure satisfaction and joy in his face. And for me, that made a big difference that he was so happy about it. Right. Mm-hmm. And it ended up, I think the quote was, he said, you killed the king of the forest or something to that effect. But anyway, so by the time Joseph and Felipe brought the vehicle over, we had our moment of silence there and paid our respects. And it was interesting, but as they were looking him over, I walked back and figured out we found out where the deer had dropped, and he jumped up and he ran maybe 10 or 15 yards and piled up again. But, that was kind of one of those little mysteries that, we backtracked and said, okay, well, let's see what really happened here, because I couldn't believe it. And Joseph was adamant. He said, I know what I saw. I'm like, yeah, I believe you, buddy, But anyway, so we ended up, getting him to a little clearing and taking some pictures and doing some, some artsy fartsy type things with some camera work. And Joseph convinced me that I need to put him over my shoulders and carry him European style with a rifle slung and whatnot. And so my little 6.5 by 55 as it was slung muzzle forward, so the floor plate was up, and I picked the deer up. Well, all the blood runs out of the nose of this thing directly into the action of my rifle.
Gosh, geez.
And so now it is just, I mean, packed with blood and sand.
Jeez, like, I can't imagine maybe salt water would be worse to put in there, but blood's going to be a close second when mixed with sand. Jeez.
Oh, it's awful. It's awful. And anyway, we had to have a chuckle about it, and but as Wampy and Felipe were taking care of the trophy and whatnot, we ended up, we stripped it down. I mean, as much as we could, and wet wipes and Q-tips and and everything we could to get all the blood out of the action of that rifle before we put it up, because as I knew it wasn't, we're going to pack it away for the next 3 or 4 days before it ever gets home, and so we want to get all that out that we could. But yeah, it was funny. It was a good moment that we had to chuckle about. Of that, here's the price we pay to get a cool shot.
Ooh, man. So. Well, man, that sounds like quite a hunt. So you're there about how long total were you there for?
I think we hunted 5 days total. Let me back up. We had scheduled 5 days to hunt, but we didn't end up using them all.
Okay.
And if you want to, John, we can go one step farther. But we ended up having one extra day. So Wampy took us over to, I believe the name of the town was Segovia.
Mm-hmm.
That was not too far away from us. And there they had an enormous chapel, or cathedral, I should say. It's an enormous cathedral, and apparently a lot of our American gold is gilding several parts of this cathedral, is what we were told. So gold from the New World ended up back in this cathedral here, because it was a wealthy and prosperous area because of the wool and the timber and the the industry that was there. But there was also a castle there that we didn't get to tour as well, which coincidentally also had a giant moat around it. But we toured the town. There was at one point in time, it was a Roman settlement, and so there was still an aqueduct that was there coming from the mountains down into town, and the aqueduct was just, I mean, absolutely gorgeous. But when you think about, and you're a military guy, and you probably think about this more than I do, but you think about other places in the world that have been, how untouched by war we are in America. Mm-hmm. There is nowhere in Europe that is untouched. I mean, nowhere. And so this huge Roman aqueduct that's just gorgeous was pockmarked with just craters from bullet holes, right? And everything you see, I mean, even the decorative cannons that were outside of the castle, I mean, you can see right on the knob at the end of the cannon where somebody had taken a pop shot at it. I mean, you can just see somebody over there going, I wonder if I can hit that, because it couldn't have been any more right in the center of it. Very intentional. But it's just, it's wild to see these, these scars of conflict everywhere you look over there on these just absolutely, gorgeous and historical things. I mean, just really, really neat area. And so that was, again, another added bonus. I know that Wampy was pretty tired of being a tour guide for us, but it was very much appreciated. I mean, even when we went back into Madrid, we had a little bit of time to go, see the Royal Armory and check out some of the things there as well. And so I think, overall, I mean, the hunting was just outstanding. But what really was the cherry on top was getting to experience the culture and the history of Spain in different areas, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, we were in a mountainous area in the Pyrenees, and we were in a rural landscape, west of Madrid, and then we were in the central area to where the government and the monarchy and everything else, the ruling powers were. I mean, it was just a overall incredible experience that we never could have imagined when we were sitting around a table at the DSC banquet, bidding on something that we're like, yeah, we'll do that, So.
And I'll tell you too, I'm not. I haven't seen where you were or any of that stuff, but I know too the front lines in the Spanish Civil War went for a long time just northwest and west of Madrid, in that general area that you guys were. And so I kind of wonder if some of these bullet pockmarks that you saw there were remnants from that fighting going on back in the 1930s there. So you're dealing with...
That is exactly what it was, yes.
Yeah, you're dealing with history from back in the time of Charles Martel and the Moors being in Spain, moving forward through Columbian times, and they're bringing all that gold back from the United States or from North America and South America, and making these cathedrals, gosh, all the way up until just some nasty, nasty fighting going on there in the 20th century. And then there's people living and working and living their normal lives there, in and amongst all of these animals up in the hills and whatnot. And then you guys get to jump in there and catch these little snapshots of the cultural history of Spain, and just experience some of this very interesting hunting in two completely different parts of the country as well. You guys packed a whole lot of stuff into less than a week in Spain.
Oh yeah, it was incredible. I mean, absolutely adventure of a lifetime. And
so you guys ended up killing 2 roe deer and a chamois, 1 deer in the chamois with the 280, 140 AccuBond, and then you killed the other roe deer with your 6.5 Swede with a 100 grain Barnes TTSX, huh?
Correct.
And you did not recover any of those bullets, did you?
No. No, we sure didn't.
Yeah, the funny thing is, you take all 3 of those animals together, and you're still probably less than half the weight of a spike elk or a cow elk or something like that too, huh?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, yeah. I mean, maybe a really big mule deer,
Yeah. Well, so is there anything that you wish you would have known about this hunt before you went over?
So the European system of how they tally you up at the end is different, right? And so we think about our American system here of you buy a tag, you go hunt, or if you take a guided hunt, you pay for the hunt, whether you're successful or not, right? Mm-hmm. So in that, it was similar. Now, I don't think that they were really going to let you be unsuccessful unless you just couldn't shoot or maybe make the hike, right? That would be the only way. But when you get done, my final invoice came in on this deal. Well, it turns out that the roe deer that I shot was a gold medal, and I don't know, John, you can probably elaborate on this better. I'm not that familiar with it, but I wish I understood that trophy system a little bit better. So that roe deer ended up being gold medal. So, when I got my final bill, there was an extra amount tacked on because it was a better trophy, right? So really, and what my understanding is they give it so many days to dry, and then it's done by weight, and so depending on what the weight is how they score that trophy. And we got to go to the taxidermy shop and visit with the guys there, and it was really neat. And we saw some really, really cool stuff. But it gave us a perspective on, what we're looking for and what we're looking at. And so I think like any hunt, we can Monday morning quarterback and say, I wish I would have known a little bit more about how we're going to hunt, or the terrain, or maybe the trophy system or any of that stuff. That's probably the only thing. Mm-hmm. But other than that, I wouldn't even change a thing, and it's just like anytime you do something, it's the first time you do it is just so new and so different that you really, really soak it in, and you do it again. And you might know more what to expect. And to me, sometimes it takes away a little bit, because your expectations are so high from that first one that it can almost never be met again. Mm-hmm. Not that you won't enjoy it, not that it won't be fascinating and just a marvelous trip. But I think that CIC scoring system is something that I really would like to dig into a little bit more and just understand it. But it wasn't like they doubled the amount of the trophy or anything like that. Nothing even similar to that. It was a few $100.
All right, well, good deal. And you also ended up shooting a really nice roe deer when you did that as well. And I'm sure that even if the guy tapped you on the shoulder right before you squeezed the trigger, you'd be like, "Hey, this roe deer is going to cost you another couple $100 or a couple €100." You probably still would have shot it, wouldn't you?
Oh, 100%. 100%. Yeah, honestly, I don't want to know. Just hey, that's a good one. Okay, perfect. And we're there for good representation. I don't need the biggest, or I don't need the bragging or rights, because the experience is something that is mine. And you can't ever take that away. And so anything that, if they say is a mature animal, I'm good. I'm absolutely good.
Well, how physically demanding was this hunt?
Well, I'm going to tell you. So, for a guy that we have our farming and stay fairly active on that, but I sit in an office too a lot, and I could be in better shape, but I was fine. I was A-okay. You know, the altitude wasn't that bad at 7,500 feet. You weren't getting into the, you know, the really just thin air to where you struggle like you would at, you know, at 10,000 or 11,000 feet in Colorado. So, you know, the hiking part of it is just, you know, if you stay within your limits on that, it's not terrible. Mm-hmm. I would tell you, I've talked to some guys since then that have gone on this that make me feel like I'm in pretty good shape. And they made it, and they did it just fine. You know, the part, you know, where we were hunting the roe deer, of course, you know, the way we had to hunt them this time because of the drought, you know, anybody can do that, and it's going to remind you very much of hunting in Africa, except you weren't sitting on a high seat. You were just, you know, you're in the cab of the vehicle. But no, it was not too awful, terribly physically demanding. I mean, I would think that just most anybody could pull that off.
And about, what was the weather like when you were there?
When we were in the mountains, I want to say, you know, I mean, of course, you start out a little chilly. I threw in just a lightweight puffy jacket and a rain shell, and that's all I took. I like the Kuyu Katana pants, the kind of the stretch woven pants. Those are my favorite hunting pants of all time. You know, that way you can throw a pair of Merinos on underneath them. I did not on this, didn't need them. I mean, it was pretty warm, but very comfortable. I want to say it was probably in the 60s in town. And then when we got up, of course, it got a little bit chillier up there. You know, I started off with it rained part of the time. I had my rain shell on, but I think I pulled that puffy jacket out just as we were sitting around as it got dark in town, and that's really the only time. Same thing when we hunted roe deer. You know, the morning was pretty chilly, but not really anything crazy. I mean, if I remember right, I looked at the latitude on it, and I want to say it's on about the same latitude as like Iowa, you know, and maybe the northern side of South Dakota, you know, kind of, or mid South Dakota, kind of in that same general latitude. And so you think about those environments in April, and what would you wear, and you'd be fine. Right. Other than it's a little bit moist in the mountains.
Well, good deal. Well, so you alluded to a bunch of upcoming hunts that you have. We are recording this in August of 2023. What is next for you?
So next is back to Namibia in November with Kova Safaris, and that's Jock Strauss and his family that we've hunted with in the past. So when we hunted there last year, I believe it was in June, if I remember right, or maybe I can't remember. Anyway, summer of last year. There you go. So we hunted with them, you know, once in the past. I mean, absolutely outstanding family-run outfit that I couldn't say enough great things about them and about the service. So that one, and then we've got spring bear in Alaska, boat-based spring bear hunt. We are talking about going to Scotland for stag in about this time next year. And then from there, I've got the fall. We should be able to draw elk tags in Colorado again in October. And then November is back to Kodiak for the blacktail, and then again right after that, turn around and go back to Africa for Cape Buffalo. And this one's going to be different for me. It's the first time to Mozambique, so I'm excited to see it. But we're going when it's going to be really hot and sticky. Man,
do you ever have time to like go to work or do anything like that with all this hunting that you do?
Well, you know, there's sometimes that I'm like, man, especially on this 2024 year, because I committed a lot of stuff before I really looked at the calendar and laid it all out. And so that is by far, that is not a normal year. I've probably overdone it, and I bet I pay for it one way or another. But yeah, so luckily, you know, most places, as long as I have a little internet, I can keep up with work and get a few things done here and there. And so luckily, I've got a pretty good staff here in my office, and they can take care of the vast majority of everything that, you know, save from a few emergencies. So I'm very blessed with the team that I have and the family at home that, you know, I get to do this stuff. And, you know, when I'm here, we work extra hard so we can go play hard. So.
All right, well, good deal. Well, Austin, I really appreciate you taking the time to sit here and talk with us today about this amazing hunt that you guys had in Spain. As we wrap up, one, do you want to share a place where people can get in touch with you? And two, do you have any parting thoughts you want to share with us.
Man, I just, part of the thing that I tell anybody is go do it, right? Reach out to somebody that's done it before. I mean, I remember hearing this. I never dreamed that I'd hunt Africa until I did. I'd grown up reading about it, about hunting in Alaska and Africa, and just those types of adventures, and it just I never realized how doable it was until I did it once, and I was just completely shocked by how easy it really is. I'll tell you to find somebody, if you can, find somebody to go with the first time, right? I mean, you're set up to where you can help people as well, and I'm glad to answer any questions. You can reach out to me. I'd say probably Instagram is about the only thing that I have on social media that you can look at. And it's just, so the handle on that is A Brown SF. So Sam Frank 007. And you reach out to me there. I mean, I'd be happy to guide anybody. I mean, I'm a wonderful bad influence. I'll be glad to help anybody do anything. So, but go do it, right? Don't sit around and think about, man, I can't do this, or how am I going to afford that? I mean, gosh, let me help you, talk you through it. I mean, I know you'd be glad to do that as well, but just go, right? Make the trip and go. The logistics of it, that's the easiest part. Getting in gear and actually doing it, that's the ticket right there. And you got to take that first step.
All right. Well, good deal. Well, this was an amazing trip. Maybe this will be something that I do for myself one day. You've really got me interested in, one, traveling to Spain, which I've never done, and two, doing some hunting over there as well. I know there's a lot of cool game over there. You mentioned wild boar, you mentioned fallow deer as well. There's also stag in different parts of Europe. Lots of stuff to do there. I just got to make it happen, like you said. So thanks a lot for talking to us about this today. I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely, John. Likewise. Thanks for the opportunity, buddy.
Now, if you'd like, you can contact Austin through Instagram. That's probably the best way to get in touch with him. Follow him there. Send him a direct message. His handle is ABrownSF007. Like he said, link is also in the show notes. Next, make sure you also check out the other podcast episode we referenced in this interview with Leighton Norwood's Aoudad hunt. Again, link is in the show notes. I also included links to my articles on the 280 Ackley Improved and 6.5 Swede in the show notes for those that want to learn more about either cartridge that Joseph von Benedikt or Austin used on this particular hunt. Neither are very quote-unquote mainstream cartridges, but they both have a pretty dedicated niche following in the United States, and especially the 6.5 Swede is a little bit more popular in Europe. Both are really capable, though, and they did the job on this hunt, and they'll work really well on all sorts of other game, to include stuff that is even bigger than roe deer and chamois. Now, I'm going to say one last time, just click that link in the show notes or go to huntingguns101.com. Sign up there to get my free ebook on the best hunting cartridges and to join my email list. You'll get an email from me every weekday if you join that list. But like I said, I hear all the time from people telling me how much they enjoy receiving them, and they look forward to hearing from me every day. You're missing out if you're not on that list, so make sure you join the club too. And as we wrap up, please do me a big favor. Hit that subscribe or follow button in whatever podcast app you're using if you enjoyed this episode. And additionally, if you really like this episode, please leave a rating and review for the show as well, once again, in whatever podcast app you are using. Doing both of those things helps me reach other hunters like you who enjoy this sort of content, and it'll also make sure that you continue to receive these new episodes automatically every Thursday when I release them. Remember, you can make your dream hunt turn into a reality, and I can help. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you back here next time on the Big Game Hunting Podcast.
This show may be over, but we have plenty more for you on our website. For more information on today's topic, as well as lots of other useful hunting resources, head over to the BigGameHuntingBlog.com. We look forward to having you back for the next episode. But until then, happy hunting.